before she was born.
Hey everyone. So as you probably heard, it's been kind of a rough week for my family. Hence the mask. I just can't risk getting sick, but I still wanted to come and see you guys. The last thing I need is to get sick right now. So hence why we're wearing masks. So I think the last time I came and spoke to you guys was probably either late 2019, early 2020. And I came to talk about my planned 2020 through hike of the Appalachian Trail. As you can imagine, that didn't happen in 2020 because, you know, there was a pandemic or something. I think that happened that year. But I finally did get back to it and I hiked it this past year in 2022. So for those of you who don't know, if you weren't there for my last trek, the Appalachian Trail is a 2,194.3 mile walk that starts at Springer Mountain, Georgia, and ends at Mount Katahdin in Maine. For me, it took me 5 months or approximately 154 days to complete that trek. The normal approximate time for people is generally 5 to 7 months. So I was definitely on the quicker end of that spectrum. This is you can see on the screen here, a map of the Appalachian Trail, as well as the picture of my starting, no, Mom, not yet. The picture of my starting the trail. It's okay. Don't worry about it. So we'll just go kind of my journey to getting to the trail. So I came and talked to you guys in 2019. And then in 2020, COVID hit and I'm a nurse. So ended up getting on trail March 16th. March 17th, the Appalachian Trail Conservatory asked through hikers get off trail. So about 8 days later or 7 days later, when I was able to get a ride home, I ended up getting off trail. I had sold my car, got rid of my apartment, and literally got rid of 60% of my things. So I'm back at my parents' house, sitting around doing nothing in quarantine, realizing that this wasn't going to be over in 2 weeks like we all thought in the beginning. So I actually ended up going and working in a COVID field hospital out at the DCU Center out in Worcester. I did that for about 10 weeks. And then I did a couple travel nurse assignments over the last couple of years, generally working with COVID patients down in Virginia and then out in New Mexico. Since then, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of my screen, that was this girl, Erin, and her dog. Her and I had started the trail together back in 2020. And then the top picture is from that COVID field hospital. In the whole process of the last couple of years, I got a pandemic dog, as everybody did. This is Kiko in the right-hand corner of that picture. Sweet, sweet boy. Came with a lot of issues and he required a lot of training, which is why I didn't get back to trail until this year. I wanted to make sure that he was emotionally ready before I went and took him on a 2,000-mile journey. About a month before I left for trail, I threw my back out and I couldn't walk for a week. And about a week after that, I broke my toe. And so I postponed my trip 2 weeks. And after 3.5 weeks of healing, I started the trail with a broken toe. That's kind of my journey to the trail. My gear changed a lot from when I talked to you guys in the past. I used a different pair of shoes. In the last couple of years, I found this shoe brand called Hoka's. They're a running brand. They're incredible. They give you really, really good cushion. I used about 4 pairs of shoes while I was on trail. You can see how badly mangled. Those are my first pair, I think. Those are my second pair that I switched to. They got pretty mangled, which is why I went through 4 pairs of them. I ended up switching backpacks about 500 miles into the trail. The backpack I was using just fell apart on me and I decided that I needed a new one. So I ended up buying a new one and I really, really love the brand that I ended up with. It's a brand called Light AF. Really cool custom packs. They're really awesome. I ended up switching from a sleeping bag, which is what I told you guys I was going to use a couple of years ago, to a quilt. And basically it kind of leaves it open in the back. It allowed me to snuggle with my dog on like really cold days. As well as I had to carry a lot of stuff for the dog. So that was a kind of a big difference from when I talked to you guys. For him, generally he had a like a sweater that I carried for him. He had a sleeping pad, extra food, that kind of stuff. So it was just a lot of other logistics that I had to deal with the dog. So hiking with Kiko, he is a wonderful, wonderful dog. But when I tried to get him, he tried to bite me the first time I ever met him. So you can imagine he was a struggle. He's a border collie. So they come with like really anxious, nervous energy. And so he was afraid of the world when I met him. As you can tell, as he's snuggling my friend Sherbert right in the middle of that picture, that he has a lot different of a dog now. He loves people and thinks everybody is now his best friend, which is amazing. And he did hike 2,200 miles with me. He skipped three sections of the trail. One is the Smoky Mountain National Park because dogs aren't allowed there. And I ended up having to board him through the Smokies. The next stretch is he was having some diarrhea when we were up in Pennsylvania. So my parents took him home for a week and my partner Dom brought him back a week later. So he skipped about maybe 100 miles there. And then he's not allowed to finish the trail, so he can't be in Baxter State Park. So my parents ended up watching him for the final about 15 miles of trail. Having a dog on trail was a lot of work. I often couldn't go to restaurants because the dog wasn't allowed inside. I always had to find someone to watch him when I was going into resupply. Many times places wouldn't let us stay because I had the dog, or I had to pay a lot of extra money just to have the dog with me. As well as you have to think about food for him. I don't have to only think about what I need to eat, but I need to think about what he needs to eat. And he was pretty picky. He didn't eat the whole first week on trail. So I ended up just buying whatever dog food they had in the store, the cheap stuff that probably wasn't the best for him, but he ate it and didn't lose that much weight and liked it better than the expensive stuff that I was trying to buy him. But he was the happiest dog ever. He did 48 miles one day with me. He was doing 20s with us. He had energy at the end of every day, could just go and go and go. It was like he was made for the trail. So next I'll talk about food. Food was probably my biggest struggle next to the dog on trail. I pretty much hated everything that I could potentially eat. My mornings generally started, I tried oatmeal in the beginning. Oatmeal, I wanted to essentially throw up by week one of eating it. So I ended up switching to breakfast essentials, which is like a protein shake they tend to give older adults to help them gain weight. I actually had 2 of those every morning and any sort of sugary cereal I could find. So a lot of Cocoa Krispies. I'd use the breakfast essentials as my milk and I would just eat cereal and milk in the morning. Lunch was probably the hardest meal of the day. I pretty much hated everything that I tried for lunch. I couldn't do tortillas. I couldn't do tuna. I couldn't do the chicken packets. Just like all of that just kind of made me want to turn the other way. I ended up pretty much just doing cheese and crackers the entire way. And then post Appalachian Trail, I actually finished the long trail. And that's when I found cold soaking couscous was actually the way to go. And that's where you put couscous in some water and it rehydrates it and you can put some spices and stuff. And I've actually found a trail lunch I actually like now. So that's going to probably change in my future hikes. But I really just did a bunch of cheese and crackers and then pretty much any sort of snack I could pretty much stomach. Generally, I ate a lot of home-style Rice Krispie treats and Chewy bars and Crunch bars is pretty much what my diet consisted of throughout the day. So I'd probably eat 2 Crunch bars, 3 Rice Krispie treats, and like 6 Chewy bars every single day. Not exactly the epitome of health on this trail, but it got me through and I still lost weight. So dinner was kind of an evolution. I started, if you guys have ever heard of like the Knorr rice sides or the Knorr pasta sides, I started with that, putting some like fresh vegetables and like cooking that. Got sick of that pretty quickly. There was a period of trail where I was just eating minute rice with duck sauce on top because it was literally the only thing I could get down. The best meal that I could do is occasionally I could get my hands on some dehydrated refried beans. If I can get my hands on that, I can make a really great trail tortilla soup, which is dehydrated white rice, dehydrated refried beans, taco seasoning, and Fritos. And it honestly, and a little bit of cheese. And it was honestly probably one of the best meals I could have eaten out there. So if I could get my hands on that, I was having a good day. And then I'd always end my day with with like a cup of tea or something. My goal was 1,000 calories per meal and 1,000 calories in snacks. So I was looking at trying to eat about 4,000 calories a day. And I pretty much did that. I tried to stay pretty much on board with that. Lunch was the only time I maybe didn't meet my 1,000 calorie goal that I wanted. The next thing, and probably my favorite part of this entire trail, is something called a tramily. And it's the people that you meet on trail that become family to you. Little did I know I would meet my main hiking partner day 2 of the Appalachian Trail. I met him. His name is Dreamcatcher. It's his trail name. We give everybody trail names. Mine is Mary Poppins. I met him day 2. He was hiking behind this wonderful woman, Sunshine, who's actually in the top picture on the left-hand side, the only other female in that picture. I met her night 1, and she and him were hiking day 2, and I zoomed past them, And then they started talking to me, and they caught up to me when I had stopped to take a look at the view. And I said, "Oh, do you guys mind if I just talk with you guys and hike?" And they were going way slower than I was, but I was like, I'd rather sit and hike with people rather than, hike alone, because that's what I'm out here, is to meet people. And I started talking to them, and Dreamcatcher and I just started doing the same thing, wanting to hike the same miles, wanting to push on. And we ended up going all the way to Maine together, which was really cool. So he is, if you're looking at the far right picture, that's my end tramley. He's the guy in the green shirt on the far right. Now, if you look at the guy in the blue shirt on the left, that's Sleeping Beauty. Sleeping Beauty, I met day 4. And I show up at our first resupply, and he's sitting there at a table, and I put Kiko's muzzle on, because he's still, I always put the muzzle on if I'm going to bring him to a new person, if I'm going to go somewhere. And I was like, we watch my dog. I have to go to the bathroom, and like my tramley's not here. And I was like, just don't let anyone pet him. And so Kiko, of course, sticks his nose in his lap and just like looks at him with the cutest eyes ever. And Sleeping Beauty stares at him and says, she says, "I can't pet you." And Kiko is just looking at him like, "Please, I just want love so badly." And so that was our interaction with Sleeping Beauty. I didn't know this happened until months later. And that campsite, we end up showing up at the camp, and, I go up to him and I'm like, "Hey, can I introduce my dog to you? He just does better if he can meet everyone at camp." And inside, Sleeping Beauty was like, "Yes, I'm so excited." But he's like, "Yeah, sure, it's fine." And Kiko loved him immediately. Sleeping Beauty hiked on and off with us for like the first 2 weeks. Then he was with us pretty much consistently until about halfway, but then he ended up getting COVID. And so he kind of lost him for about 300 miles. And then he did 30-mile days to catch up to us. And we ended up catching back to him. And he went to Maine with us also. The third guy, and the guy on the top, that's Easy E. We met him about week 2 on trail. Kind of hiked around us on and off. We saw him on and off for the whole first half of trail. The right before the halfway mark, he showed up on a random rock that I was sleeping on, and I was like, "Easy, what's up?" And we started talking, and I go, "You want to hike 48 miles with us tomorrow, or whatever day? You want to do the 4-stage challenge?" And he said, "Sure." So from that day on, he hiked 48 miles with us a couple days later, and he never left us, which was really cool. We had a bunch of different other tramling members. We had an extended tramley. They called themselves the Hocho Hoes because they loved hot chocolate. My tramley was called Kiko's Flock, and our two groups kind of towards the end spent a lot of time with each other, and so we call them our extended tramley. And then there were people along the way that I spent a lot of time with that I really enjoyed spending, and I still talk to. My original tramley, that top middle picture, I still talk to almost everybody except for one of those guys in that picture. I talk to everybody still to this day pretty frequently. Oh, Mary Poppins, just because my bag had some interesting things that people wouldn't expect, and I could just pull them out with the drop of a hat with it, and it confused people a couple times. Pretty much. So next I'm going to talk about the type of days on trail. So, there's generally, as we're backpacking, we're carrying everything on our backs all day, every day, carrying our food, shelter, water. Occasionally we would slack pack, and that's when someone takes your pack and brings it a little bit further down the trail, and you get to go with no pack for a couple miles. One day it was accidentally 26, but generally we tried to slack pack between 10 to 15 miles if we could, because then it would allow us to kind of go faster and finish that day a little bit quicker, and kind of have a break on our shoulders. Other kind of days are 0 days. So the top left-hand corner is a picture from my favorite 0 day. It was in Luray, Virginia. I had to take Kiko to the vet, and the vet actually invited us over to her house after. We got to use her pool. She didn't charge me for the vet visit, only for the medications for him. And then she drove us to Luray Caverns after so that we could go hang out and look at the caverns, bought us lunch. It was an amazing day. We only took, I want to say maybe 7 full 0 days, so 7 days off completely. Otherwise, we tried to Nero or Hero the day. So a Nero day is where you hike, I consider less than 10 miles into town is a Nero day. And then a Hero day is when you still do, when you hike in the morning, go into town, you resupply, do what you need, and then you hike out of town. So generally 15 to 20 miles is still a Hero day. You're still hiking a good mile day. And then, they're one of my favorite slackbacking days. And 0 days I like to talk about is the time that I invited 15 through hikers to my mom's house without asking permission. And when we got to New Hampshire, they came, they took a 00 at my house while I went to a wedding, and they all hung out and drank and ate and kind of just rested for a couple days. And then I convinced 12 of the 15 to slack pack over one of the hardest traverses in the White Mountains. And they did it and they killed it, which was pretty awesome. It was really cool. Town days kind of consisted of, we either stayed in a hotel or sometimes some free churches let us stay for free, or we camped in random people's yards. It kind of just depended on the town. We would do laundry, we would buy food, we try to get as much rest as possible. Generally we did try to stay in our tent and stay someplace for free if we could, just because of money wise, it's expensive to stay on the trail and to hike the trail. And so anyway, we could find to save that money, we would. So those free like tent sites in town were really awesome. When it came to like water, I know a lot of people ask me water. We would filter our water. So a lot of the times, we get water from trail and we go into town and we prefer the water from trail than the water in towns, because oftentimes, hotel sink waters aren't exactly the most tasty of waters. So next is I'm going to talk about Trail Days. So Trail Days is a big festival that happens in Damascus, Virginia, that celebrates everybody hiking and who has is hiking this year and has hiked in the past. And basically it's just a big festival with a bunch of gear and different companies that come. You can buy stuff like for discounted pricing. You can win things. I've won a bunch of stuff for free. And then it's just a way for like hikers to meet up for a weekend that haven't seen each other in a long time. There were some people that I hadn't seen for like a month who ended up coming to Trail Days, and we got to spend some time with them. It's essentially just like a big party. A lot of stuff going on there that I did not participate in, but it was very interesting to watch, that's for sure. Next is the 4-state challenge. I kind of alluded to this before. So you start in Virginia and you hike all the way through West Virginia, which is about 2 miles. And then you hike all the way through Maryland, which is about 30 miles, and you end up in PA. It ended up being a 48-mile day for us because we got lost early on and ended up adding in some extra miles that we did not plan to add. We started at 4 a.m. and ended at 11 p.m. doing those 48 miles. I did it with Easy E, Dreamcatcher, and Kiko did it. The guys were really awesome, and each of them carried a pound of dog food so that Kiko didn't have to carry anything for that hike. He only had his backpack on, which was really helpful, and I think was the reason why he was able to kind of make it through. It was kind of actually sad, and we've been thinking about going back to redo Maryland, because Maryland has a lot of history on trail, and it talks a lot about like the history of our country. And so we did miss that. And so it's something that I think I'd probably go back to try to learn about that, as well as all the camping areas in Maryland looked amazing. Towards the end of the hike, we did finish in the dark and the terrain was rocky and we couldn't see where we were going. And it felt like we were going in circles, and we all felt just kind of out of our minds, because when you hike 48 miles, you start to go a little delusional. As you can see, there's pictures of all of us on the ground because we were just completely out of it that day. We did end our day with seeing green eyes in the dark, and that was definitely a scary situation. Turns out I'm pretty sure it was just a bunch of deer, but when you've been hiking at probably 47 miles at this point and you see green eyes in the dark, you're not thinking it's deer at the moment, but it was just deer. And thankfully I was with one of the other guys at the time, so I didn't have a full meltdown. But poor Easy was by himself, and we waited for him after we saw those eyes, because we were like, this guy doesn't want to be hiking alone in that. The next challenge is probably a better challenge, I think. It's called the half-gallon challenge. It's when you reach the halfway mark of the Appalachian Trail, you're challenged to eat a half a gallon of ice cream. So Easy didn't do it. Dreamcatcher and I attempted it. Dreamcatcher failed, but I easily passed that because I love ice cream and I had no problems. I ordered French fries after that, and I ate about half my French fries after I ate that half gallon of ice cream. But I will say I am a proud member of that half-gallon challenge, and I could probably do it right now if I wanted to. Next is Trail Magic. Trail Magic is probably my second favorite part of the trail, next to my tramily. And it's when people in the communities kind of go out of their way to just help hikers. They go literally out of their way. So these are some of like kind of the top like left-hand picture. That's Treehouse. He follows me on Instagram, and he was like, I want to help you guys. And so he picked me and the guys up, took us to resupply, went, got us lunch, took our half of our resupply, met us a couple days later so we wouldn't have to carry all our food, brought us more food that day. And then when we went to Damascus for trail days, he picked us up, took us to resupply, and then took us to a cute little hike that we would have never seen in Damascus if he wasn't around. Really awesome guy. He's wicked nice. We still talk every so often. He's got his family, down in Tennessee. There's another guy, Clayton, who helped Dreamcatcher and I out after the Smokies. He picked us up, took us for food, took us to resupply, and then drove us back to trail the next morning. He's sent Dreamcatcher and I multiple gifts since trail, just like genuinely really, really nice people who just love to follow hikers. I talked about the my vet who found out we were hiking the trail and didn't charge me for the visit because we were hiking the trail, and she was just so happy I brought him to be looked at. And then she let us use our home, bought us food. I mean, I just talked to her the other day. And then just random people, we'd walk to an intersection and people would be set up with food for hikers. And it was just like the generosity of people just kind of really, it reminded me, it's kind of like Rotary, right? Like we're there and we just help the community out of the goodness of our heart because that's what we want to do. And like, this is these people's way of giving back to the community, and they do it for hikers, which is really, really awesome. And then hitchhiking is probably something that I know Gino doesn't like me talking about, and my mom kind of got used to because I did it. So we did hitchhike for most of the trail. About a third of the way in, we realized that it was more cost effective to hitchhike than it was to pay for shuttles. Shuttles would cost us $50 to $150 just to go 3 miles, whereas hitchhiking was free. So we've had some fun hitches. A lot of we would squeeze all 4 of us and the dog into the tiniest cars you'd ever see. We rode in the back of pickup trucks. One of our hitches gave us his phone number and picked us up at the end of our town visit and drove us back for free. Just like people it's surprising what people will do for hikers. If they think you're a hiker, they'll pick you up. There were definitely some interesting hitches. We had this girl and her boyfriend pick us up, and she goes, "Let me just put on clothes first." I was like, "I'm not sure I want to get in this car." And that was an interesting scenario. I think they were playing some game I didn't want to know, but they dropped us 2 miles from the trailhead and they were like, "This is our turn," left us. And I was like, okay, but we got a hitch like right after that. Definitely not something I would do in my normal life, and I would never do alone. But where I was generally with 3 other guys and I had my dog who would definitely defend me, I was not really concerned about it. The terrain on trail was interesting and different. Depends where you were. Oftentimes we were in a green tunnel. You couldn't see where you were going. Sometimes you'd have flat terrain. Sometimes you have little spiky rocks that you just can't walk your feet around. Occasionally you'd have river crossings up to my waist because I was short. The other guys, it was always up to like their mid thighs. For me, it'd be up to my waist because they're way taller than I am. And then you get the presidentials in New Hampshire where you're just walking across these massive rocks. It's insane how different the terrain was from state to state. One day you're walking on beautiful like beds of dirt, and the next thing you're walking on pointy, spiny rocks along the way. And some states were surprising. Pennsylvania is known as Rocksylvania. People hated PA because of how the rocks were and how you just couldn't step around them. And then people loved Georgia because it was just kind of rolling hills and like easy walking and whatnot. And Virginia, they say Virginia's flat, which don't believe them. Virginia's not flat, but in comparison to the rest of the trail, Virginia's pretty flat. We were able to do 20s, 25s, marathon days in Virginia like it was no problem. Then you get up to the Whites of New Hampshire, and you all know the Whites. You can barely do 15 miles in those days, which is very interesting. Injuries. I do get injured a lot. Obviously, I'm here sitting with you with a broken ankle. Thankfully on trail, I didn't have anything crazy bad. I did fall a lot, especially towards the end of trail. I was falling multiple times a day, and I think it was just my body was done. It was just ready to be over with the trail, and it was just unable to kind of keep itself up. Having the dog on a leash doesn't help either because when I fall, if I'm by myself, a lot of times I can catch myself, but if I have the dog, he doesn't know to stop. So I did end up falling a lot. Had a couple really, really bad bruises and stuff on my legs. I did deal with plantar fasciitis from about mile 600 until I finished the trail. That was pretty difficult for me. I ended up having to like roll my feet out every night, massage my calves. It was something I was able to deal with, but that was probably my biggest like injury per se that I dealt with. You can see that middle picture. That was my shoe that I finished trail with. Probably was part of the reason why I was falling a lot because I did not really have the best support on my feet, but I swear I was not getting a fifth parachute to finish that trail. I was finishing in 4. So, you know, it happens. I did twist my ankles a lot on trail, which probably is why my ankle's broken now, because my ankles were probably pretty weak after walking 2,200 miles. Would I do it again? Absolutely. And then fundraising, I think I talked to you guys about this when I left. I had fundraised money for this woman who had lost her leg due to venomous snake bite. And I had raised all that money for her, and I got that money. We got her half the money. I still have to get her the second half of the money. COVID kind of made that a little difficult because my friend who was there, who was going to the doctor's appointment, is no longer there. So we're working on trying to figure out how to get that rest of that money to her so she can get that upgrade of her prosthetic. But otherwise, I was raising money for Pegasus House and Women's View, which are 2 women's shelters in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Helps women from ages 18 and upward dealing with mental health and addiction issues. It is a wonderful organization, and I was able to raise $16,620 towards that. There was one amazing person who actually donated $1 for every mile that I hiked on trail, which was pretty incredible. But thank you guys so much for your support. I know a few of you definitely followed me along the trail, and I do appreciate all the kind wishes that you guys have given to me. I do have a little thank you note for everybody with some pictures that I will have my mom pass around for me. I am still putting up content on my Instagram about trail. Since I am stuck for 6 weeks, I'll probably be posting a lot about the trail on my Instagram. So if anyone wants to follow me, that's Nurse on the Trail. And I did do a YouTube series of the trail. I have talked every single day on trail. There's a video. And so there's probably, I don't know, probably like 20 or something videos up there from my trail. So if anyone wants to watch any of those, it's Nurse on the Trail on YouTube. But yeah, anyone have any questions for me?
The one question that I'm so curious about, so you said the trail is 2,000 miles, but then you have to go off trail to get food. So did you track how many miles you did total?
I didn't, but there were definitely times where we would have to hike, 2 miles to get off trail, 2 miles back. So, yeah, we only hiked 2,200, but we probably did way more than that. But it was just, I didn't bother kind of track that. Would have been interesting to know, but it's definitely a lot.
Well, and I think there's just so much here, and all of that. And no, it was really great.
Yeah,
it was very inspirational. So yeah.
Anyone ask a question now?
You'll be interested to know that the Appalachian Trail is not unknown to the Bedford Rotary Club. It was my pleasure a number of years ago to arrange a weekend hike up Lafayette. And we had a group of 15 or 20 of us. So it was a great time and wonderful hike.
And we also brought the on Washington.
Oh,
Remember
forgot
that?
about that. Couple Rotarians.
Probably, yeah.
And I took the flag up, Bedford flag as well as a Rotary flag.
I always heard that Vermont area near or New Hampshire, Vermont are the toughest sections. What is the tough part?
So, the toughest sections, I think it's very subjective. If you're talking about physically the hardest sections, I would say northern New Hampshire and southern Maine are the hardest sections of trail. Mentally, for me, northern Maine and New York were the hardest sections, but that was just mentally, I was not in a good place. At least all of New York, there was something about as soon as I stepped into that state, I couldn't get out of there fast enough, and I was in a bad mood. I hated it. I was miserable the whole time. And then northern Maine was just physically hard because I didn't want the trail to be over emotionally, but physically I needed it to be over. And it was like, I just wanted to get to Katahdin, but I also didn't want to get there at the same time. But physically, I would say northern New Hampshire and southern Maine, that's where you're hitting all the 4,000 footers. And I made all the guys hit every single 4,000 footer that we went nearby, even if it wasn't on the trail. So we were doing a lot of extra miles in general when we got to New Hampshire in general.
Right, those 4,000 footers, you go up and you have to go all the way down.
Sure do. You sure do.
All right. And yeah, oh, you have a question. Sorry, Cliff.
How many times did you actually stay in a hut or whatever as compared to in your tent?
So I probably stayed in my tent about 80% of the time. I would say 5% of the time in like a hotel or something, and then the rest, the 10% in like a shelter. We never stayed in huts because the dog couldn't stay in the huts, and I didn't start staying in shelters towards the end of trail because a lot of people don't like the dogs in the shelters. But towards the end, we were only around people who knew us. And honestly, my dog was amazing in shelters, and literally we never had an issue. So I started, caring a little bit less about having him in there. But I tried to be more considerate of others. If it was a bunch of people I didn't know in the shelter, I wasn't going to stay in the shelter. And I just was always generally happier in my tent until towards the end where I was like, I never wanted to set up the tent. And then I was like, oh, can we just stay in the shelter, please? Just kind of depended on my mood for the day and how many miles we did.
Couple of times we had some nice Airbnbs courtesy of mom.
Yeah, a couple times mom got us some nice places to stay, which was awesome.
How many times did you meet her on the trail? 'Cause
Oh,
that was
yeah.
3. I would say
It's more than that.
3 or 4.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vermont.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so you went down at the beginning.
Virginia, no, she didn't.
Yeah.
My partner Dom, he dropped me off in the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Virginia, Pennsylvania, Vermont,
New Hampshire,
New
twice.
Hampshire,
No, only New Hampshire once, and then Maine.
and then Maine.
Yeah.
That's a lot, that's a lot.
Mhm.
I put them all up. If you ever been up in Vermont, I put them all up at the equinox when they were in Vermont. So
Yeah, it was really
the
nice.
boys were pretty impressed with that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised though. You had to like all your stuff and all the stuff that your dog too. That's
Sure does. Yeah, I started with a pack weight of 38 pounds. I got it down to about 30. About 500 miles in, I was like, something's got to change here, and I changed out a lot of things. Mhm.
Thank you so much for coming. That was amazing story. Thank you. Recording.